Alessia.
Ladies and gentlemen and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me today are...
I am James, also known as Aramithius.
I am Michael. You might know me as Moonsugar Leader or Scourgicus, and this is Mocha.
Hi, Mocha. We love you.
That's a cat.
And I'm Nick. Just Nick.
Yep. Today we're talking about, well, it's a little specific, actually. I had this this moment of inspiration, and I asked everybody if they wanted to try talking about, in a roundabout way, the Alessian Rebellion, but more specifically, one particular line from the Song of Pelennor Volume 2, which is... which struck me as interesting, and it's always kind of been in my head, and I've never really fallen down the rabbit hole of exploring its full potentiality, which is what I wanted to do today. To set the scene, Alessia is praying to Mara, probably.
Yep.
And it says the handmaiden, which the Nords call Mara Kind's handmaiden, so the thinking is that she's talking to Mara, or literally a handmaiden. And she says a number of things, including the line, and this thing I have thought of, I have named it, and I call it freedom, which is just another word for Shazar who goes missing. So... the reason why this stuck in my head was the idea that Alessia, for some reason or another, makes the statement that she has thought of a thing and named it freedom. Like she's invented this concept. Now, you can simplify this by saying, well, this is during the Alessian slave rebellion against the Aelids. And that, you know, they hadn't known what freedom was up until that point because they'd been enslaved by the Aelids for so long, and so they'd just forgotten culturally what freedom was, and then she just rediscovered it. But that's just a simple... I mean, why not just read way more into it?
But that's not what we do here.
That's not what we do here. So I thought, what if Alessia actually invented the concept of freedom in Mundus? What if in Mundus, and this is during the First Era, so this is comparatively early in the history of Nirn. What if in Tamriel up to that point no one had actually had a conceptualization for freedom? And the reason why I thought this was really interesting was partially because of this like very outlandish idea that the concept of freedom is not an intrinsic a human idea that just evolves naturally over the course of people becoming conscious, or is not, you know, a God-given concept, you know, that is intrinsic to anybody who has a soul, but rather that this is an intellectual breakthrough that has to happen as the result of possibly divine inspiration or whatever, at least in terms of Tamriel. I'm not in any way suggesting that this is not something that people don't naturally have a grasp of as human beings in the real world. Not suggesting that at all. I'm just suggesting what as more of an intellectual exercise, what if Tamriel was the kind of place where you actually have to invent really basic shit like this? Oh, hey, it's Felix. Wow, he's early. An early Felix.
Excellent.
Yes.
My goodness. Hey.
All right.
Hello.
A wild
Hi,
Felix
everyone.
has entered the room.
Now it's a party.
Yeah. Oh God, it's like holy crap! Like it was late getting back from work, and I'm like, God damn it! I was done early. I should be on time. Fuck! I haven't even had time to make a proper drink. I was gonna make like ginger ale and bourbon, but I figured you guys were starting.
Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm drinking ginger ale and scotch.
Yeah.
That's your first square on the bingo cards for those of you
Oh yeah,
playing along
that's
with
right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't forget everybody. And so, Felix, your timing is really good. I literally just made it through the intro. Basically, to encapsulate again for Felix's benefit, I'm quoting the line from the Song of Pelennor Part 2, where Alessia suggests that she has thought of the concept of freedom. And first off, I'd kind of like to have a discussion about why Alessia would have come up with this idea and what was the inspiration of it. And secondly, is it even possible? And I mean, I'm not suggesting that this is a correct way or even an incorrect way of understanding Tamriel, but is it possible that you could have a universe of any kind where very basic concepts of human existence need to be discovered by the inhabitants? So, first off, let's give a little bit more background about Alessia. A lot of people in the Elder Scrolls lore community, statistically speaking, and a lot of people who have played Elder Scrolls games, statistically speaking, have played Skyrim, and that's it. So, the Alessian Rebellion was, I believe, fleshed out, if you'll pardon the use of the word, in Oblivion, where we got the majority of the backstory for the Alessian Rebellion against the Aelids. This happened during the first era, where help me out here, they weren't Nedic.
Yeah,
Were they?
Yeah, they were.
They were Nedic.
They were Nedic. Okay, where the
They were
needs
a variety of different tribes that you get things like men of Keptu, men of Gi, and a whole string of names which are not relevant to the Aelids, because the Aelids did not let men have names except in secret.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, some Aelids didn't. That's one thing we have to stop ourselves from saying, is that that all Aelids, it's hashtag not all Aelids, that some Aelids were absolutely on the side of human freedom and etc. Because thankfully the Elder Scrolls universe does not take an incredibly black and white perspective on things like racism.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
gonna-
they
that's gonna
actually
be
say
interesting.
that there were some Colovian alien lords that actually joined with the Colovian humans to be like, yeah, you know what? Fuck the Nibene Basin, really. Like,
Yeah.
it's overrated.
Not really that crazy about that place anyhow. And so yeah, the needs were being bred as slaves by the Aelids and being experimented on and tortured and all kinds of horrible shit. And in the town or in the area of Sardavar Lead, which I think at the time was just called Sard, there was an Aeliad settlement where Saint Alessia was born, and from her encouragement, her prayers to the Nines and etc., who became the gods that became the Nines.
Eight.
8 at the time. Yeah, thank you. Very good point.
Yeah.
She was able to sort of rouse a revolution against the Aelids, and how exactly she went about doing that, in reality, is a little bit difficult to say, because the majority of the information that we have about Saint Alessia comes from the Songs of Pelennor and other extremely old, in terms of Tamrielic history, documents that are so ancient that the language sounds esoteric and is broken in pieces. It's a little bit like reading the Gilgamesh epic, where there's just like chunks of text that are missing, and people have filled in what they think might be there, and that kind of stuff. And there's also a lot of weirdness associated with Saint Alessia, like the idea that she was married to possibly a bull or even a minotaur, or she was married to a bull and then her son was the first minotaur. We're talking about Belharza, who was almost definitely a
Belharza's
minotaur.
The man bull. Morehouse is like the winged minotaur.
Winged
I'm
minotaur.
pretty
Thank
sure.
you.
He's portrayed as a winged minotaur in some sculptures, but
Yes.
he's called a winged bull in the text. But you look at Mesopotamian imagery and you look up the concept of the Lamassu,
Right.
and
Yes.
that is precisely that. It's winged bull with a man's face. And that's my headcanon for what Morehouse was, just because of the Gilgamesh inspiration that I know is part of Pellennor's real world inspiration, and so I try and pull from the Near East and world whenever I conceptualize that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think at one point or another, Kirkbride was quoted in a forum somewhere as saying that, like, that Morehouse may have been represented as a bull in artwork, which was just a statement about his personality or the size of the human or something like that. And then he said, but on the alternative, absolutely a winged bull. and
Yeah.
which again I
Yeah.
like. And
And
considering the fact
there's
that the songs of Pelennor were written by Kirkbride, then I mean, even it just goes to show you, even he doesn't really have 100% answer on anything. Which is great. That's by design. And so
aren't the statues of Mora House in Oblivion of just a dude?
No, that's wait. I can't now I can't remember if the statues are of Mora House or Belharza.
I have seen statues of Morahaus, but was it in Oblivion or was it ESO?
Well, there are statues of Mora House where Mora House is
in Oblivion,
is purely a man.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that can be put down to Alessian Order revisionism, if I'm brutally honest, because there are hints that happens.
I like that.
Just in how on Minotaurs where they just say that there's various things about basically Belharza being whitewashed and the origins of Minotaurs being blurred and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because like Mora House was like a throwaway line or a quest, or like a throwaway line in a quest in Oblivion, where they say that before Minotaurs used to be like part of society, and now they're just like out in the countryside because of I think the Alessian Order's like brutal like theocratic fascism, basically.
Yeah, the Alessian religion, or the revolution brought with it a lot of philosophical ideas that were possibly mutated or just usurped. And the Maruk, for example, is a real piece of work.
Monkey.
My guy.
Yeah, guilty until proven innocent. Yeah, okay.
So anyway, freedom. In a complete contrast.
Wait, it's monkey speak. So it's like want freedom, get freedom. Like it's simple. Thus the prophet spoke.
And so let's try approaching this from one particular direction. Let's say that Alessia did in fact discover the idea of freedom. First question: why her? Because the Needs were not the only people being enslaved at the time during the First Era. So go, Felix.
No.
Well, sorry, I thought you were going to continue, but
no, keep going.
All right. I have a theory, and I admit it's somewhat harebrained because there isn't really a lot of evidence for it. So take this with like a mountain of fucking salt. My theory is that it was really the Eight's form of apology to Lorkhan. Because Lorkhan was all about, hey, you got to find ways of freedom and breaking the cycle and everything. And there they are forming like the world. It's still a young world at that point because we're in the First Era, straight out of the Merethic era. And they're realizing like, oh, you know what? The situation here is kind of messed up. And whether they won't admit it or not, the Daedric plans were like, maybe Lorkhan was like kind of right. So maybe we'll just like do this little thing to show his great dead, great God's ass cheeks in the sky out of the moon to be like, yeah, here's our apology. And then he sees that and he's like, you know what? Not bad. Cool. I'm gonna put a Shezarine in there. And then it's like, there we go. Everything's happening.
They put
that is my admittedly harebrained theory.
Well, actually, that Aramithius just reminded me of something in chat. What we should probably actually start with is trying to define what we mean by the word freedom.
Oh, God.
Right.
Oh, boy.
I have a thought.
Okay.
See you in 5 hours, folks. The Americans are here.
Who's ready to earn their bachelor's in philosophy?
Well, get out of the way, because here's James with his.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I was actually going to there's basically two conceptions of freedom as a thing. There's I got introduced to them as freedom from and freedom to. So you have the idea of freedom from coercion. So there is nothing actively stopping you from doing a thing, which is the I think it's the right-wing version of freedom, because let's bring politics into this, because it's not complicated enough with the philosophy. That's basically saying that a beggar who is on the street is no less free than a millionaire in his mansion, unless the police are knocking on either of their doors and beating them down, because there is no one physically restraining them. There is no coercion from any particular entity making them do or not do a thing. But if you think about freedom too, it's freedom to be able to do stuff. It's free. It's not freedom as in theoretical freedom of action. It's freedom in terms of actual agency.
Right.
And so you have that as sort of the left-wing version of freedom. It's freedom to be able to get a good education, to be able to have 3 square meals a day, and those sorts of things, which in some politics you'll say they'll, and including the guy who came up with positive and negative freedom as the way to describe these things, that freedom from is negative, freedom to is positive. He was quite behind the negative version himself, and so we're saying that freedom to essentially means imposing certain limits on some things in order to make sure that everyone has this particular standard and way of doing things. Which I found a Zizek quote on this, which I think is another way of putting it. And Zizek uses different terms for this, but he's talking about the same stuff. That this is the distinction between formal or negative and actual or positive freedom. This is what the distinction between formal and actual freedom ultimately amounts to. Formal freedom is the freedom of choice within the coordinates of the existing power relations, while actual freedom designates the site of an intervention which undermines these very coordinates. So, in order to ensure freedom to, in order to ensure freedom to do some freedom to for everyone, you need to change society, which is potentially where we're going with Alessia. Because in theory, even under the aliens, they had freedom. They had freedom from, because there probably wasn't an alien master standing over them saying, "You're going to shit in that bucket, not that one." And so there's freedom from coercion under some circumstances, at least.
Have you met the elves though?
Yeah.
they're pretty.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, they made flesh
there's
gardens. That does seem like kind of thing they do.
Now the question then becomes, the difference in freedom, the difference in ideals of freedom across cultures.
Right.
Because Alessia saying all men should be free infringes upon the alien freedom to have, unpaid labor.
Right.
Yeah.
Also,
now to bring this back
to maybe we should say hi to him.
Let's get Andrew in.
Yeah. Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
Hi, space person.
Oh, you're mute,
hear
brother.
You.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
Wild White Guar has entered the room.
Yeah.
Oh God! Get me my spear.
Spear.
Hang on, he's having...
Yeah,
Wild Guar in
Did
the
you not
room.
plug it in,
Hang on.
Andrew? Did you not plug it in?
We'll probably
Yeah.
Putting the casual and casual Ed Scrolls podcast.
Putting the bingo in my bingo card.
What was it you said, James? The Selectives Lorecast, which is a technical difficulties Lorecast.
Yeah.
It really is.
We're professionals.
I'm still not hearing you.
Yep, still muted. Yeah, choose your input in Zoom.
We need to make
this. This is Daedric interference.
It really is. It really is.
Oh, speaking of Daedric, could the invention of the concept of freedom have something to do with the transition?
There you are.
Okay.
For a second
Hey.
Intro.
The little light was blinking to tell me it was muted.
Yes, you gotta poke that.
But not only was it plugged in, it was also muted, or not plugged in, it was also muted. So like multiple levels of incompetence. But anyway.
Yeah. Insert free speech joke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, you're now free to speak.
I hope so. So I was listening to what you were saying about the freedom of men and how that impacts the freedoms of the aliens. And that makes me feel. That makes me think of a real world parallel we can make where the freedoms of one group of people infringed on the rights of others to hold those people as slaves. I wonder what I'm referring to. That's so weird.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a mystery.
Yeah, never heard that argument before.
No.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now I have a question. Could the generation of the concept of freedom have something to do with the transformation of Jigalag into Shagarath?
Oh. Yeah, that's yes, if we kind of smash some stuff together, and we're going to get metaphysical with this one, because if freedom is just another name for Shazar who goes missing, and Sheogorath was born from the whole of Lorkhan's divine spark or whatever connections that way, then if we before then potentially before Sheogorath, you may have been functioning in a fairly deterministic universe. Although that would also imply then, if we're taking that myth about Sheogorath literally, then Jigalag would have to disappear at convention. The point where Jigalag was ganged up upon was convention, because that was when Lorkhan's heart was ripped out.
But at the transition point of every era, Jigalag comes back. So it's still extant upon the fabric of reality. Just suppressed by non-deterministic madness. In fact, good lord! Perhaps that's how Vivek vanished. Coincidence in Vardenfell. He invoked Jigalag in some way, shape, or form.
This is already a spicy cast. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I don't see the relationship between madness of Sheogorath and the order of Jigalag and how that relates to freedom. I more see that in relationship to Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon, particularly, because
I think we can still kind of, just to like bigger picture this for a quick second, we can still more or less make the original argument of, that Daedra had the choice of becoming involved with convention and chose not to. That was a freedom of choice that also then separated Aedra from Daedra. So like macro picture here.
I mean, Aedra also were free to make that choice.
I know, but I'm just saying in terms of like a macro theory here on the whole, without getting into the nitty gritty, which I know is what we usually do here.
Yeah.
That I feel is very much
Let's start on the foundations though, not on the 5th floor.
Yeah. So like that's kind of a similar way of looking at freedom and what forces may best adhere to some definition of freedom.
Okay. I have a thought for you guys.
Like the Daedra want to be free to peddle their influence, as an example.
Yeah. Okay. I have a thought for you. So, briefly, I just want to bring in some theology stuff. So one of the questions that tends to come up is, how much free will do humans really have?
Right.
Okay. And the answer, of course, is probably not that much. And this can come back to areas of, genetics, upbringing, society. There's a whole host of things that can limit your freedom. Okay.
Neuroscience.
Neuroscience, right. Yeah. And so in theology, then the question is, well, how much does God really hold you accountable for? I'm not about that question right now. So we know that Lorkhan created the Mundus as a realm of possibility, okay? Because Lorkhan wandered oblivion and got bored with it, and stuff was showing up and going away, but eventually it all became right? And so what did he do? He came up with this idea of creating possibility, and that is Nirn, the Mundus, specifically Nirn, or arena, right? The arena of change, the arena of possibility. According to the Khajiit, the darkness in his heart also turned it into a prison. Okay, that's another subject. Here's where it gets interesting, I think, because possibility change within with an undercurrent of darkness becomes a prison. how do you get out of that prison? If this is the only change possible, if this is the only path possible, if your freedom is limited to the point that all you are is a slave, what's the path forward? And this is why it goes to Shezar, or Lorkhan, which is rebellion. So what was the one line I put in a story once? Sometimes the only answer left is a knife. Okay. I don't mean this in the real world. Not real world. We're talking mythology here. Yeah. But yeah.
So
yeah, that's I can kind of take that as something that's the Lorkhan almost, the way I'm trying to reconcile that with the possibility that Alessia created freedom, which I think is an awesome idea, and I want to link that in with something else a bit later, but we'll get to that. Is that Lorkhan created something where the possibility of possibility was a thing. The design of the Grey Maybe wasn't that it was going to be something that had absolute change as a thing, but it had the possibility of change.
Right.
So
okay, yeah,
you can so you can say that Lorkhan's space could have got there were however many dice being rolled saying freedom. Is this the time freedom happens? No. Another dice being rolled. Is this time freedom happens? No. The Alessia dice gets rolled. Is this the time freedom happens? Yes. That works within that sort of a metaphysical framework. If you think of Mundus not as a place of inherent chaos or inherent change, but something where change is possibility, and you have potential, and potential is another big thing in there as well.
Well, I think that's
all
why,
maybe, baby.
I think that explains why men are more Padomaic than Anuic, because they tend to. I mean, that's one of the basic things of the man-mer dichotomy, isn't it? That like take the how they view the dawn, for example. Most elven cultures, I say most because there are outliers like the Dunmer who don't really share this kind of worldview, but they see the dawn as this infinite splendor, immortality forever, and it's going to be great, and we're all gods, and that's awesome. But then the men see that as cold and desolate because it's not changing. There's no freedom of possibility. You can't make a choice to not be immortal in that sense. But to them, that is death. Like that without life, there's no death, and with no death, there's no life. Something like that. I'm kind of rambling now.
Okay.
But I mean, what I'm getting at is that men are chaotic in that, I mean, one, their lifespans are shorter, change is more frequent for them, and I think that's the end of my thought.
What's up, Michael?
And so just as kind of a tail end on what I was talking about as rebellion, the reason I say that because I know that sounds more like a Dagon thing than a Lorkhan thing.
I was gonna suggest but I held my tongue.
Going back to the Song of Pelennor, in her prayer, she says, I've created this thing called freedom, which I think is just another word for Shezar, who goes missing. You, that is Mara, made the first rain at his sundering. That would be Bloodborne fans. And that is what I ask for now of our alien masters, that we might sunder them fully and repay their cruelty by dispersing them to drown in the Tobol, cutting them in parts. And Morahas, your son, mighty and snoring, gore-horned, winged, when next he flies down, let him bring us anger.
Dun, dun, dun.
And so, rebellion.
Yeah, it is absolutely
raging
rebellion.
bull in the china shop of Cyrodiil.
Yeah, I might actually want to tie that into Dagon actually, but this is using a half-baked tinfoil theory that I can barely remember. But
tinfoil hat theory is my favorite.
Yeah, basically the idea is that I think this is pulling in some bits from Sithis, and I'm not sure quite where else. But the idea is that if you take Sithis at its word, then Lorkhan looks for all the world like an Aedra, but isn't one. But to be an Aedra also involves looking like you have a realm of your own. But we know that that's not Mundus, because Mundus is the combination of everyone. I've heard it said somewhere that that particular realm is Lig, and it's somewhere in if you search for it in Reddit, it's like something like Dagon made the moons, or if you want to find Lig, look up. I think that's the title of the thread. But it's the idea is that Lig is Lorkhan's Daedric realm as such as it is. And if you then link that to Dagon, where was Mehrunes the Razor made? And if we're taking Mehrunes to be connected to Rebellion, is it possible that he was connected to Rebellion through his absorption of Lig ideas, through being that connected to Lorkhan?
Or I like it.
Yeah, it's a little tenuous, and it leans on other theories in order for it to work, but it makes my brain juices feel good.
Well, what I think about when we're talking about these freedoms, I remember a specific line in the commentaries in the Mysterium Xerxes where he's talking about Numantia, liberty.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also, I think that was in the Numantia intercepts too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Where that was first mentioned, I think. So I don't know. I mean, that's another connection to Dagon, which we've kind of danced around Dagon a little bit.
I mean, he is the Leaper Demon King, so it makes sense that we kind of jump and hop around the subject a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I mean, that's kind of what I was driving at with like Molag Bal versus Mehrunes Dagon. Molag Bal is like the utmost perfect personal freedom. It's freedom to do whatever you want without worrying about the repercussions of what you're doing to others, right? And although I mean that kind of conflicts with one of my own philosophies of Molag Bal, but I'm going to run with it. And then Mehrunes Dagon would be. How would I fit that in? It's not really the freedom of others. I mean, I guess it's if bringing down oppression is freedom. I mean, changing the world to I don't know. I had a thought that was really good.
If you're combining both Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon's fears, Molag Bal says yes, you can treat other people like crap. Mehrunes Dagon says yes, but those other people can also punch you in the face back.
Yeah. Well, no. What was it you were saying? What was it you were saying about positive and negative freedom?
Yeah. Negative. Yeah. Sorry. Carry on.
But because I mean, I was trying to think of how Mehrunes Dagon would fit into that, and so
yeah,
if both represent a manner of thinking and personal freedoms, one could be positive, one could be negative.
Yes,
and I mean, does that? I didn't hear the whole thing about that.
Yes, that does work. If you consider Molag Bal to be well, if it works, if you consider the Zizekian way of looking at it, of formal freedom versus actual freedom, rather than positive and negative. But for formal freedom, being able to do what you like, is Molag Bal, because you can, if you're strong enough, you can beat everyone around the head and rule them that way.
Sure.
Whereas actual freedom or effective freedom requires upsetting power relations, which is all about revolution and
to make the world more liberty, I guess, liberal. I guess.
I have some thoughts on this. But also, I just want to remind people that there is a meme out there of Slavoj Žižek colored like Vivek, and so it's Slavoj Vivek, and it's amazing.
It's beautiful.
I'm now on the hunt.
But the main thing that I want to say is, like, in terms of how you can connect Mehrunes Dagon to this, my memory is a little fuzzy from the Mehrunes Dagon cast, but the way I think of him is he's kind of like, to a certain extent, in the loosest possible terms, a lot like the Hindu god Shiva in terms of being a destructive god of change, because you need to destroy something in order to provide the opportunity to allow something new to come in its place.
Does Shiva
how that plays in with the Alessian rebellion and everything is how that was a very violent uprising, which allows for the space for a new order and for freedom to exist within it. But freedom cannot exist within an oppressive structure, meaning you need the destruction to bring about the change. And so that's where, like, even though he's not necessarily invoked a lot and ostensibly helped, as we know in ESO, at least one or two Aliad cities against the men, it's still kind of his jam of like, things are so chaotic and changing, death, destruction, I love it.
Well, it's like one's authoritarian, the other's anarchy.
Like I guess, but the main thing is that I just want to sort of try and make that connection, because you were wondering how to sort of connect that. That's how I would see that, is that it creates the space for that change that could involve freedom, or it could involve another terrible form of oppression. That's the problem. It's a void that then needs to be filled. But it can't exist to give that possibility until the pre-existing structure is broken, which again is one of the messages of Coda of, hey, you got to kind of break the world to make a newer, better one, because that old world wasn't able to accomplish that.
Is Mayr's Dagon the dreamer?
Okay.
Maybe.
I'm gonna have to come over here and slap you for that one.
Yeah.
No, I chose the wrong moment to look at that Vivek meme, and so like, it yanked me right out of it.
So let's talk a little bit about.
You have traveled here to my city of Vivek. Yes, let me tell you a lot about dialectical materialism.
So okay.
Welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual mess of a podcast.
Yeah.
Dude.
So that's actually a good way to talk about. I mean, I think we've kind of danced around this a little bit, but let's try to see if we can encapsulate this. How does Lorkhan relate to the concept of freedom?
Oh heavens! I think that's pretty straightforward. And that it's. Well, I mean, he's the space mutant. Space, it's movement. It's you know, but we also need time simultaneously. So the union of Lorkhan and Akatosh in Akatosh's binding to the Mundus at the removal of his heart, that creates the 4-dimensional space wherein freedom can occur.
Right.
If I explain that.
But by functioning as the god or the representation of 3-dimensional space, Lorkhan is actually limiting the all space of Aetherius, or creating or forcing the possibility of space into the no space of Oblivion.
Well, isn't limitation also in his sphere?
You can't really qualify Lorkhan into a single word. So saying that that Lorkhan
jackass.
I would suggest this. I would say that Lorkhan is the god of freedom, depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
And that Lorkhan's representation of freedom is that Lorkhan represents freedom in the respect that, again, according to who you ask, it is possible that Lorkhan represents the escape from the Kelpic cycle.
I like that.
Or the desire to escape the cycle.
Felix is going to explode. Let the man speak.
Okay, go.
All right. Remember, Lorkhan failed so that we might know how to succeed.
Right.
And again, in terms of being the god of space and also needing time, the idea, if you want to kind of big brain this for a hot second,
Why would we do that?
Is about is that the space represents a blank canvas. It's possibility. It is up to you, and with the passage of time, to determine what fills that void or that canvas.
That's a good way to think about it.
So I would view, not that I would view, but I feel that Lorkhan's view of freedom is almost indistinguishable from the idea of possibility. And I really mean the idea of possibility in terms of, hey, here's, a piece of paper. What are you going to do with it? You going to tear off a bit of it, stuff it into a tube and like blow it at the back of your teacher's head? Are you going to write your number on it and pass it to a girl? Are you going to draw a dick and pass it to your friend? Like, are you going to actually take notes and study? Are you going to paint? Are you going to crumple it up and throw it at someone you don't like? The possibilities are endless, but it's up to you to decide. And Lorkhan likes that. That's how Lorkhan operates. He gives you that space to do what you want. And he purposely failed to allow us to succeed and know how to succeed, which then brings us back to, if I can bring it to the real world for a hot second, Lorkhan is, again, in many ways, a avatar more or less of Krishna or Vishnu. Like it's complicated. I don't want to get all into that again because we'll be here for fucking hours. But basically he's constantly having reincarnation, so he's not really a missing god. He's there in the legends. He constantly has like little avatars, like just being shit disturbers all around Tamriel. His dead body is in the sky. For a missing god, he sure is everywhere. Also, to wrap this up, the reason why he keeps sending like those avatars back is like a kind of like two-sided purpose. One, to show them like, hey, look, here's change and freedom, and do what you want with the space I gave you, etc. But in terms of like that sphere in the real world, as far as Hinduism is concerned, and that direct lifting of why does Krishna need avatars? Because it is to help in the maintenance of the, yes, I know, Andrew soon. It's to help in the maintenance of the cycle until it's time for the change and destruction, which is how it's connected.
Okay.
Teacher.
I almost wanted to. He was being so polite, and I almost wanted to ignore him because it would be funnier. I thought.
No.
It would be. Sometimes I got students have their hand up, and I'll look at them, and then I'll ignore them.
Yeah.
You're evil.
Just to be that jokingly rude, and then I come back to their question.
Right.
Okay,
yeah. Exactly.
So in other words,
anyway,
good to know Satan teaches in Oregon.
Yeah. So what I wanted to bounce off of what you were saying, Felix, and I think this ties into what you and I were talking about, Chris, about Lorkhan being freedom and limitation, somewhere in there. And so Felix said a sheet of paper. There is a limit to the sheet of the paper. It's the difference between being dropped in a sandbox and being told go nuts, and being dropped in the Mojave Desert and being told go nuts.
Well, I think in the second option, you get shot in the head. The paper was an
analogy for like a blank canvas. What you do with it is up to you. But very valid point nonetheless.
Different
there is a
limit. Property.
Adding a limit makes it. It allows us to cherish it more, which I think is really the point of the mannish worldview, is that life is temporary. So we stop and we smell the roses and we drink the beer and we eat the food and,
and we enjoy it while we've got it.
And we marry buff orc girls if that's your jam.
Just to kind of overextend Felix's sheet of paper metaphor.
Again, that's exactly what we do.
Yes.
I kind of get the feeling that Lorkhanic freedom is the kind of the freedom to kind of ignore what happens in the lesson altogether and concentrate so hard that you create your own sheet of paper.
Yeah, a little bit, actually. It is a little bit. It's, you've been given the sheet of paper, and it's the same sheet of paper you're given every lesson, and it's the same sheet of paper that everybody gets, whether they like it or not. But Lorkhan's lesson is just ignore the lesson. Take your sheet of paper and make the most you can possibly make out of it until you're not in the lesson anymore. And that's kind of, and I mean, well, is the counter argument to that, therefore, that while the Manish point of view is things are temporary and we should cherish them, the Marish point of view is things are everything that's temporary is useless because it's temporary.
I would say so. Yeah.
I was going to say,
go ahead, James.
The Murish perspective, as far as I see it, is that well, you say the Murish perspective, the alt-Murish perspective, generally.
Good point.
But that perspective is that temporality is a thing. It is a disease. You need to limit it as much as possible, which is why they cling. Which is why they cling to the past and the veneration of the people who gave up everything so that they could have some sort of a stab at permanence.
And then I mean
that doesn't really happen.
And then if we include the fan theory that, and I have to say fan theory because people will jump on my ass if I don't, if you've been watching Tesla lately. But the whole thing that the Thalmor are trying to destabilize the towers to bring back a permanent dawn. I mean I think
you gave James a migraine with those words.
A little bit. I mean,
I know exactly the thread he's referencing because you had every other comment referencing the thread that saying that this was because of a mistake on TS Wiki.
Which I mean, my whole thing is, well, whether it's a mistake or not, we can just run with it because it's cool to think about. But anyway,
but my thought, just to get things vaguely back towards Alessia, is that I'm not sure that she necessarily invented freedom if we're going to link it to Shazar or Lorkhan. However, I do like the idea that Alessia was the first prisoner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could say she birthed freedom.
Yes.
Because to be a prisoner, you have to be aware of the fact that you are constrained.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, isn't that sort of Lorkhan, though?
Okay.
Felix.
It's gonna be one of those streams. Okay. So quickly, just to backtrack ever so slightly to what we were just talking about, I wouldn't say that the Elven view is that things are, temporary, therefore useless. Because again, it's not also the Elven view; it's also the Redguard view or the Men of Yokota view that existence is a trap, it is a prison, it is temporary and therefore bad. One wants to achieve permanence. So totality, immortality, permanence in the stars, eternal being. We was gods and shit. Like that's the purpose. So it's not that things are useless, it's that they're unimportant. The importance is the, like, again, I hate using this term because I've used it several times so far, but bigger picture, what's more relevant to you, to have a good life now or try and like rejoin the gods from where you once came from? If that's your cultural point of reference, one of those is going to seem a lot more enticing than say, yeah, stop and smell the roses. Well, there are no fucking roses in Yokota, okay? It's a fucking desert hellhole. Like, no, existence bad. It sucks. It's yucky. Like, nah.
It smells like body odor.
And then to bring it to like the prisoner and Alessia and then is Lorkhan the first prisoner? I would say yes, because Lorkhan went and he saw the wheel and realized this is my fucking prison. So yeah,
he saw the tower
in that sense.
Which, by the way, the quote of like Lorkhan failed so that you may know how not to is about is a response to the question of whether or not Lorkhan attained Shim or not.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that Lorkhan might be the first to discover that he was a prisoner. But I would also suggest that anybody who doesn't think of themselves as a prisoner just, I mean, that's up. I mean, you could. I mean. Look, I mean, the prisoner is a metaphor, which we can go into about how metaphors work in the Elder Scrolls. But one thing that most people would probably agree with is that being a prisoner or being imprisoned is a state of mind in a philosophical sense, and not necessarily a statement on reality. If you're handcuffed to a bed, are you a prisoner? are you just, about to get you a shit
Depends on the context.
Yeah, it depends on how you look at things. If somebody grabbed, if somebody breaks into your house and ties you up in a corner, maybe that's your shit. I don't know.
That might be a you problem.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's a you problem. So, I'm sorry, I'm suddenly thinking of a quote from Dave Chappelle at this point. So it's really kind of a it's what we're starting to arrive at is a question about what Alessia meant by freedom. Which really is what we've always been talking about that. But let's try to kind of approach this from another angle, which is when she says that freedom is just another word for Cesar who goes missing. Maybe what she means is that before she named it freedom, that this concept was personified by Shazar, and that she's just taking this concept of Shazar and applying it to humans. Okay?
Perhaps.
So maybe that's what... So earlier at the very beginning of the cast, I was suggesting that we might have an entertaining bit of debate about whether or not the Elder Scrolls universe is the kind of universe where you have to invent the fundamentals of existence because they don't normally exist, right? And this kind of goes hand in hand with like that whole like weird way of looking at the Elder Scrolls universe where you think about it as like a place where gravity doesn't exist and there's no oxygen, there's no atmosphere either, like that kind of stuff. Like it like the fundamental like I think James just got where I'm headed with this. The fundamental laws of what we consider to be reality do not necessarily apply in the Elder Scrolls universe.
Yeah. So like if someone were to skid across the ground and then not have road rash, for example, maybe friction. I mean, where are we ever told that friction is a thing?
Right.
Like that kind of. It's almost piddly. Like hyper specific. I mean, there are some things that we can assume exist that don't necessarily need to be explained.
This is again on the running theory that the Elder Scrolls universe actually exists and that they're just stories that Bethesda is interpreting from actual Elder Scrolls in their basement, and that they have to convert them into a video game so that people can read about these real things that happened in a really real place for real.
Yeah. Although
perhaps then the Elder Scrolls universe is literally text-based.
Yeah. I would kind of take it as the idea of you do have to invent the fundamental laws of reality, including and potentially if we're including the concept of freedom in that, this also fits. But I don't think we that it's not at the level of the human that this happens. Mm-hmm. It's not. If you're taking the Elder Scrolls cosmology literally, you've got the gift limbs who are the laws of nature. That yes, they did have to be invented, and they did have to say this is what they're going to be. Mm-hmm. So, which again fits with why freedom is Shazar who goes missing. Because it all ties in with the Etarda defining concepts.
It's like if somebody said, well, I've invented the concept of suffocating, which is really just another word for kind.
Yeah.
It's a different way for the gift limbs to operate.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like if Nern was a Rube Goldberg machine. Yeah, and figuring out. I can do this.
It is. I'm sure there are several Bethesda coders who will tell you exactly how it's a Rube Goldberg machine.
So there are Rube Goldberg
machines. Seen Dwemer Ruins.
I feel like Jigalag is like operating the whole thing.
And losing his goddamn mind because it's not going according to plan.
He's losing his marbles.
Hey! All right.
Hey!
This is why I love this cast.
Right, we've been going for that's it. On that note, I think we're done.
We've been going for an hour.
We all just
on the very first seconds of the Alessian Rebellion.
Yeah, and that's yeah, that's true. On the opening chapter of the Alessian Rebellion, we've already blown 55 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, but that I'm just trying to think.
That's us.
I'm just trying to think though. Is it because as to what sort of an impact Alessia has on the notion of Shazara's freedom? I don't know. It might be something special about Lorkhan, relative to the other giftlings. I mean, Shazara as a unique giftling isn't particularly an unusual idea, but that's the only sort of conceptual. Actually, I was about to say that's the only conceptual link I can make, but then again, Stendar is mercy. Okay, I've talked myself out of my own point. Continue.
I was gonna say, like, the connection between Shazar and humans is that it is established that after convention and when Lorkhan's heart was ripped out from Trinimac, the human armies kind of like dissolved away because their leader Lorkhan, their god, was dead, and they're like, well, shit, okay, there goes that, okay, and then they kind of scattered to the winds, and the elves are like, we won, but at what cost?
But at what cost?
Now. And like that's how the play ends, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt, after that, all the different humans, so Kathringi, Netties, Atmorans, etc., just like, yeah, so like, our god was killed and that shit kind of sucked, but he was right about a lot of things, okay? And so and they also just like, your god is fake. So like, and so that's why
your god is fake. This mace isn't.
Cesar is important because it's like, yeah, hey, you know how like we're a bunch of slaves to these uppity elves and how they killed our god? Doesn't that make you angry?
Mm-hmm. Does it trigger you, libtard? Yeah, that's right.
So a question.
Wait. No, hang on. The Imga exists, right? Does that mean their jimmies are rustled?
I'm sorry, Felix. I've been hanging out in your YouTube comment section too much. I don't.
Have you seen all the upset cis hetero men that love Ben Shapiro? Because boy, howdy, I sure have.
Have you seen the face app fusion of him and AOC and what it's doing to these people?
Oh my god.
Oh.
It's driving them mad.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. And I don't want to.
Yeah.
No. So
things are better left to the imagination rather than confirmation.
This is not the cast for that.
Reach.
Yeah, not the cast.
We can do that later.
Are you from Western Skyrim? Because oof, what a reach.
So a question I wanted to pose.
Felix.
Is so if Alessia kind of birthed freedom or defined freedom or something along that lines, what does the longevity, or rather lack thereof, of that freedom suggest about freedom as a whole, or how we can look at it in a historical sense,
in the Elder Scrolls universe?
Yeah,
right,
because I mean it was I think only a couple hundred years later where the Alessian doctrines were put in effect, and so you've got the Alessian Order and then the more radical Marukhati Selectives, and that's shedding the elven taint from Akatosh and all of that. I mean,
complete side note: someone already got bingo in chat, so congratulations, person.
So let's you win one metric freedom. Yes, that's right. 1 unit of freedom.
Okay.
No, Imperial.
I guess Felix did make a dick joke. That is right.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the timeline here. This is the Alessian Rebellion took place in the year 242 of the First Era. Can anybody think of any other slave rebellions that happened before that? And I'm going over the timeline here on UESP, but I'm not guaranteeing that this is exhaustive.
Prior to the Alessian Rebellion?
Prior to the Alessian Rebellion, were there any slave rebellions on Tamriel?
The only one I can think of is the Falmer against the Dwemer.
That's after, though, because you have the War of the Crag coming to a climax right at the point the Dwemer disappear, which is 700.
And I think it predates the it doesn't predate the Durrani, does it? Because I mean whether the Needies or Ned Needs peoples were enslaved up there too as the basis for Bretons.
No, that's after. That's after.
It's after.
That's what I
thought. That's what I thought.
I don't necessarily read that as slavery either.
I know. That's kind of why I threw big question marks around.
In the late Merethic era, doesn't really have a time. The Nords rebelled against the dragon priests. But that doesn't necessarily mean slavery.
Yeah, I mean it was more.
There's different types of.
It was a tyranny, like the
tyranny
of dragons.
Of slavery.
Yeah, there are different types of that. That's a good point. But
they also had Mirak.
Yeah, and it kind of reads like the Nords were worshipping the dragon priests, so they may have in a way allowed them to be.
I mean, it's the difference between slavery and a dictatorship. I mean, yeah, it's still a pretty bad situation. Don't know that I'd call it slavery though.
Well, I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna push back on that one, and I see where you're going. I see where you're going.
Yeah.
But how do I say this? There's okay, so like I'm talking about my idea of that, you know, the restriction of freedom leads to a situation in which there's no way out, right? Mm-hmm. That happens not simply in political systems, but in thought life as well. That you can, through the various manipulations, whether it be neuroscience or I'm thinking of brainwashing is a great way, that you can be messed up in your head so much that you get into this tiny little
more
box.
of a metaphorical slavery.
It's more it is metaphorical, but it's also
okay.
It's cognitive. That there can be that's a kind of, so like brainwashing is the obvious example, would be mental slavery.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, okay.
Or cult indoctrination or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jonestown.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Jonestown. And also the Needs were literally being bred and tortured by the they were literally viewed as property by the Aliens, whereas the dragon priests, you could argue, viewed the Nords as like worshippers, maybe, or peasants or something similar. Anyway, it's definitely not the same situation. It's still not a good one, but it wasn't the same situation. Subjects, maybe. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good word.
Yeah. So we could, I guess it might be possible to suggest that thus far, from what we know about the timeline of Tamriel, the Alessian slave rebellion was the first slave rebellion, which then also suggests, and I'm pretty sure this is a safe bet, that the Dunmer were enslaving the air quotes beast races for some time before that. I think that's the case.
They weren't Dunmer yet, right?
They weren't Dunmer yet. Yes, they were Chimer.
Yeah. It's a good point. So were the Chimer enslaving any races at the time?
I don't think we have any necessary evidence for it. There is one book that will give us an answer that is about the founding of Dres as a house.
Right.
Because their founding as a great house is predicated on them bringing slavery to Morrowind society or Resdane society, but I don't remember when that was.
Are there any widespread instances of any of the races in Tamriel enslaving their own?
Wanted Gemini makes a good point in chat. Cadwell came from the Merethic era and is nicknamed the Hero of Sirid and the Champion of the Third Nedic Massacre. So there were possibly at least 3 failed Nedic revolts before Alessia. So, I mean, there may have been other slave rebellions, but they weren't successful.
Yes,
and so we don't hear about them.
Possibly they weren't slave rebellions so much as just culling stock.
Well, yeah. I mean, because there's a Nedic massacre. I mean, that implies one group wiping out another group.
Yeah, and to be a champion of it also implies that one group fought back. If it was a culling, then that wouldn't have necessarily been the case.
Although knowing that Cadwell is the betrayer too, I mean.
Yeah, that's because the things were set in motion and then he screwed them over. So.
Yeah, hearing the name betrayer from that whole thing in Elsewhere, but the guy who would earn the title the betrayer probably isn't concerned about not betraying people. So I mean, it's like a not a precedent, because a precedent comes before, but you know what I'm saying, like an example of something this guy would do. So it's not out of the realm of possibility for him to do something as bad or worse.
I mean, it's probably very easy to interpret this line in the Song of Pelennor as being, artistry, and and not supposed to be literal. But I mean, I'm also sort of like suggesting that this entire episode of this cast should ignore that reasonable explanation altogether.
Yes, that's not what we do here.
Yeah, that's not what we do. Yeah, we
are the biblical literalists of the Tamrielic world.
Yeah. So
and I am a material girl. Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to throw around was if we do suggest the idea that Alessia had to invent the concept of freedom before it could exist in Tamriel, what other things would also likely have to be invented or likely have had been invented in Tamriel if freedom is one of them?
Everything.
I mean, you don't have to invent time, because that got done for you. You don't have to invent weather.
Yeah, I'd say
you have to invent clocks.
Chains, both physically and metaphorically.
Whose?
Yeah.
Chains.
Chains?
Yeah, you in order
as in restraint, and also as linking or something. I mean, there's a lot of metaphor that can go into that. So
in order to have the idea of being free in any context, you have to have the concept of not free, which again goes back to possibility. I mean, it's like in order to have any idea of freedom at all and not just be purely deterministic, you have the possibility of doing more than one thing.
Which means that somebody had to invent slavery.
Which I think ties back into Lorkhan being freedom within limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in that respect, would you have had to have invented, for example, the concept of education?
Repeat that?
Maybe, but
would you have to invent the concept of education?
Like scholarly pursuits or something? Like, isn't that Julianus or someone?
Well, that's exactly where I'm kind of headed with this. Hello. That's kind of where I'm headed with this, which is the idea of some of the elvish or high elf gods, like was it invented the way of walking? Wasn't Xerxes?
Finaster.
Finaster? Or was it Sirabane?
I think it was
Finaster.
I think it was Finaster who taught the men how to take longer strides, and that improved their lifespan.
Shorter strides. And that's what I go for.
And that's why a symbol is like a boot.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was just so simple and on
footwear. That's what this guy does now. Yeah.
Yeah. But you've also got Xerxes, who was the idea of recording stuff, but that's not necessarily education as such.
Very true.
I think that was possibly where you were trying to go with it.
Right. What, like for example, would you have to invent the concept of history? Yeah. Not as in things have happened before, but rather we remember things that have happened before. We talk about things that have happened before.
Yeah, marking memory. That things have happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
And memory. There you go.
I think. Oh, and I think that does tie in with Orgnum, with Xerxes, because he creates Orgnum out of his favorite memories. So you've got that recontextualization of the things that have happened before. That's part of Xerxes's understanding of his role, or at least what he can do. So
let's see.
One of the things I want to throw in is that something that would have to be created is joy. Because if you go back to this is existentialism stuff. If you go back to the experience of the Aedra waking up and finding themselves torn apart and missing maybe a lot of what they were, the Nirn would be an experience of hell. It would be horrible. It would be unspeakable. But for Lorkhan, this is a place of joy because it's a place of actual possibility. And teaching that concept of joy, or being able to experience joy, would be its own kind of revolution.
I got snapped by a BSOD.
Terrific.
Yeah.
I like the idea that, like, I agree, actually, Michael. I think that the earliest experiences of a conscious individual, which is to say that like an Aedra experiencing the world as an individual and not part of the Daedric or aetheric all of oneness, would definitely be one of would you could argue would be one of pain. In the same respect that you can also say that, well, no, then that's neurologically that doesn't actually make any sense. But
well, something Gnosticism.
Well, I was going to say like the first cries of a newborn baby, but that's not really. I'm too much of a scientist to say that that's true.
But in the Elder Scrolls universe, it might be true.
Yeah, that is accurate. Yeah. Well, I mean, because children can experience, while in the womb, they can still experience pleasure and pain and all kinds of things. So it's but
look, if
not necessarily in Tamriel.
You're going to be feeling a bad time. You're going to be having a bad time.
Exactly. Not necessarily in Tamriel, which is I got to slap myself back into world creation mode here. And I do like the idea that joy was not something that arrived in Tamriel early.
Right.
In fact, I would suggest that joy was probably, or the feeling of satisfaction or something similar to that was something that would have happened after the assassination of Lorkhan.
Yes.
The snow whales.
Also, the concept of natural beauty. Why would you look at the unit of this place, this prison, and think of it as beautiful?
Yeah.
I also
I
also get the idea that, although the idea at least of positive existential experience, if I can put it that way, definitely existed fairly shortly after, because otherwise Veloth wouldn't have rebelled the way he did. He wouldn't have led his people out, because there wouldn't be the idea that people living in Somerset had soft, easy living and all the rest of it. So there was some understanding of life as ease, at least, before that point.
I would present the concept. I would present the idea that the concept of satisfaction arrived very early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possibly upon the moment of Lorkhan's evisceration.
Every time I hear the word satisfaction, I think of Ghost Choir 9.
Yeah, Owain in chat argues that the first version of joy, or I would say satisfaction in Mundus, was Schadenfreude.
Oh no, that's canon.
Yeah,
that's canon.
Yeah.
Well, you could say that
makes a frightening amount of sense.
The first occurrence of beauty in the world is when Boethia did his thing, and everybody took a look at what happened afterwards and said, "Well, everything's better looking than that," and so that's when they understood what beauty was.
Maybe.
What's that Bo Burnham song?
Well, I mean, you had the archetype of physical beauty, via Dibella.
Yeah.
But to attribute that to this prison, right, to this hell in which that we're stuck in, that's crazy talk.
Yeah.
I would argue that Dibella is not beauty. Dibella is attraction.
Yeah, I mean, Dibella needs a better definition. Well, I mean, Dibella needs to not be Dibella. Dibella needs to be something completely different from the perspective of if you're going to build a functioning, pantheon. Dibella and Mara are tricky to separate, and we've had that conversation a lot of times. So
I mean, I think they're separate in the same way that, like, in the Westerosi mythos, there's you've got the mother and the crone and the maiden or whatever.
Yeah,
but and I mean those same archetypes can be attributed to, the maiden being Dibella, the mother being Mara, the crone being, who is it, Namira? Is that who?
I don't know. But Kine, yeah, it might be Kine. But the problem is that isn't really laid out early in Bethesda development. So in they just sort of ended up with these three feminine gods that kind of had a lot of overlap thematically. And they didn't necessarily have to. It demonstrates a much more. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Do you want me to tell you about Hindu goddesses real quick and some of the overlap?
Oh God, there? No, that yeah. We're talking about overlap. Yeah.
We'll be here for a while.
Let's make this the Selectives Lorecast a 12-hour long Lorecast.
Yes, do it.
We just sit around and eat like Cheetos and talk about our day.
Get fat and talk
Why
about
do
lore.
I feel personally attacked?
No, that wasn't an attack.
Just kidding. I don't eat Cheetos.
Come on, gentlemen. We should do a 24-hour long stream where by the end we're saying Vivek doesn't exist.
Actually, you know what?
And Michael Wright is actually just a mushroom.
For like charity, and if it was like the day before they announced Elder Scrolls 6, like reveal the big gameplay and everything, that's like the only instance I would do that.
I have been trying to organize one of those. It fell to bits fairly rapidly. But anyway.
Count me in.
We'll do a 24-hour... This no Twitch channel is complete without a appalling 24-hour subathon where I have a whiteboard behind me and
Yes.
And then you gotta have another camera on like your dog, and then every time there's a sub, you give your dog a treat.
Right.
Because
yeah. If you sub, I'll give my dog a treat. Yeah. That's fucking terrible.
This is the Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
I want
in
my
the
dog
event
to
somebody subscribes, we're probably just going to I don't know.
So we're supposed to be talking about the Alessian Rebellion.
Yeah.
And
we're wrapping it up. We're wrapping it up.
Felix, may I remind you that we are an hour and a half into a podcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
We are supposed to be talking about anything but the Alessian Rebellion.
I know who we are. I've been here for years. Don't call it a comeback.
Can I bring one last philosophical point? There's one type of freedom we haven't touched on at all. Existential freedom, radical freedom, which is basically the experience of freedom that basically it's best summed up in the kind of the feeling of vertigo. That the idea, if you kind of look over a cliff and think, "Ooh, that looks terrible. Oh, my stomach feels queasy." A large part of the feeling queasy is I could actually jump.
I could, if I wanted to. I could absolutely jump. Yeah.
The idea that you can, in theory, do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And according to very weird quantum mechanics physicists, I could fly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it's that sort of notion of being able to do anything, but being restrained by yourself, which I think also plays slightly into Lorkhan's version of freedom. If we want to go that way, it's that that the thing holding you back from potentially being anything and everything, if you want to go a particularly Buddhist route about it, is just your understanding of what you are and what you can do, what you should do, and those two things aren't particularly different.
So what I'm seeing here is that 3 of the 4 corners of the House of Troubles have an association to freedom.
Oh.
Sheogorath is the radical freedom, says Dr. Nightstone in chat. Now I'm thinking about Malakath being the freedom to reject society, like an extremely Henry David Thoreau kind of, sorry, not, was it Thoreau?
Yes.
Who went and lived in the woods?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. like that kind of freedom. Like, I don't want to be attractive like all of you. I just want to be me, and fuck you for trying to make me conform, or something like that. So,
I like it.
Malakath is what do you call it? Individualism.
Yeah. That's exactly where I was going. Yeah.
Freedom to reject society.
Yeah.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
And if you don't have bootstraps,
right.
make better boots.
But at the same time, Molag Bal, for example, is related to freedom in the respect that Molag Bal is the restriction of freedoms.
Yeah.
And Mehrunes Dagon is the freedom to if you depending on how you interpret them, destroy or throw a temper tantrum or change things, you know,
as kittens are wont to do.
Right.
So the entire house.
I did that for you, Michael.
Bless you.
The entire House of Troubles is various. Actually, every Daedra represents some form of freedom.
I said that earlier.
Yeah. Well, I was actually kind of trying to figure out where Periite fell in that.
Freedom to choose to die.
Freedom from freedom.
Freedom to impersonate Akatosh because Akatosh is a little bitch.
No,
where does Azura fit into that?
Periite is freedom from freedom. Azura is freedom from boundaries.
Yes, because you just reside in something where nothing is defined. Yeah.
Right.
Boethiah is freedom from people who annoy you.
Yeah.
Freedom to spread rumors.
Sanguine, freedom from sobriety.
Yeah.
Hey,
freedom to imbibe
freedom to
anything
be
you
a
want.
hedonist.
Freedom to be a hedonist. Also
Freedom-
Mephala is free love.
Freedom from restraint.
Make love no more, man.
Right, man. Yeah, I mean,
Mephala is every like 60s hippie girl.
I want to see an Elder Scrolls game where that's the depiction of Mephala, where she shows up in a tie-dye shirt with like steel gray hair
and like
47 cats,
Birkenstocks and socks and
like her house is just full of Himalayan salt lamps. Yeah,
bold of you to assume that she lives in a house.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Her fucking patchouli smelling
camper.
yurt in the fucking woods has Himalayan salt lamps everywhere, and there's her organic vegan garden. Most notable is the kale patch.
And she only eats what
her
falls
sole
from trees.
possession is a juicer because she doesn't cook. She's a raw food vegan.
Chickpeas.
So she just prepares like different juices and smoothies and whatnot.
And
any given day of the week, what's for dinner? Lentils.
And
always
she does,
lentils.
And she does perineum tanning and does hot yoga every morning.
There you go.
How did we get from Alessia to this?
You started this.
No,
because this is the Selectives Lorecast, a casual, meandering, insane Lorecast.
Lord.
No, I do think we had some pretty good.
We have the
nuance
freedom
here.
to do whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah, there you go.
Praise.
There you go.
Because this is
within Twitter's terms, within
Lorecast,
Twitch's
an Elder
terms of
Scrolls
service.
Lorecast,
Yep.
not
But
a topic.
I do think, Chris, we should do another one on this because we did address several good questions, but there's a lot more questions that are raised by Alessia and the Alessian Rebellion.
Oh, but we only covered the first few seconds.
Yeah, I mean, no, we could start doing deep dives into the Alessian Rebellion. I would love to do that. Yeah.
I want someone to write. Yeah. I want someone to write about Mephala's fart yoga.
Okay. Amazing, yes. But also, by the way, I'm demanding that the next cast that we do about the Alessian Rebellion is called Alessian Rebellion 2 Cyrodiilic Boogaloo.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Come on.
Someone better make a post about that on True STL, I swear to God.
No.
Hey, you're free to do that right now, my guy.
That's on you, Doc.
Someone could be you.
You did that to you.
Carpe,
so
the motherfucking DM.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just
all right,
trying
folks.
to imagine fart
Right.
yoga.
Before we just disintegrate entirely, can we sign off, please?
Yes. Let's just sign off. Thanks everybody for listening to this ridiculousness. Send us emails.
We'll
be back next time with the next 5 seconds of the Alessian Rebellion.
Yep. The email address is selectiveslorecast@gmail.com. Please send us whatever you want us to discuss, and we will get to it.
Yeah, I promise we'll do it in a more organized way than this.
A slightly more organized, but nonetheless chaotic.
Yeah, exactly.
We are
all right, folks.
Oh,
thanks.